This weekend I watched Relay, the new film by David Mackenzie. It stars Riz Ahmed as a fixer who works as an intermediary between companies and the whistleblowers who want to give back the material that they've stolen. Um, he has an elaborate system of protections in place to conceal his identity and his the nature of his organization. In particular, that he only communicates to either party using a relay service intended for the deaf. He has a special console into which he types. That is then read aloud by the staff at the relay service to the person on the other end of the phone, and they in turn type their replies back as text. However, his latest assignment is a woman who worked for a gene company, a food development company, and she's concerned about the potential effects of a genetically modified crop. He gives her all the information she needs to try and sell back the information back to the company, but he starts to develop a certain interest in her. And his carefully structured isolation and shell starts to break down as the two become closer, and the counterintelligence team hired by the company to protect their own interests start to get closer as well. I thought this was terrific. A very up to date contemporary surveillance thriller with a brilliant central hook of the concept of the relay service, where we see these people acting as intermediaries, completely oblivious to what's going on. They have rules about confidentiality and a whole sort of ask no questions, tell no lies ethic, and they keep no records of any of their conversations, so they're completely isolated and insulated from any legal action, which I find really fascinating that these people could be unwitting brokers of all sorts of nefarious goings on and just doing their jobs. Ahmed's character, who we don't find, he's not given any kind of name for most of the film. We only find out his real name close to the end, and even then, it's open to interpretation whether or not he's telling the truth. He's a fascinating character. He's also a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and when he eventually speaks there, we see information about his background, about his being a Muslim New Yorker in the early 2000s, a time that was naturally very difficult. And the way he has constructed his life, the way he has constructed his shell to protect himself from danger, both as part of his business, but as part of just protecting his inner core self. And it's a really interesting character and a really subtle, engaging performance by Ahmed. Lily James as the target is a much more complex, superficially character. As the film goes on, we see sort of more layers to her, but it's a really sort of subtle performance, I think, in a different way. Sam Worthington, I didn't even recognize as the head of the surveillance team. I find interesting because he's very much a professional, someone who does the job, who is polite when he needs to be and can be, but is also pointedly rude. There's a recurring thing where, while using the relay service, whenever the person who's the non-hearing member of the conversation hangs up, the relay operator has a little script saying, "Thank you very much for using the relay service. Have a wonderful day." And catch that the surveillance team always hang up before they finish speaking. But the film does a very good job, I think, of showing the New York setting as being very isolating and very alienating. It's a while since we've seen a city setting like that, particularly New York, a city that prides itself on its community spirit, on its sense of identity. Here is alien and isolating and remote. Our main character is constantly wearing a variety of disguises and outfits to blend in, to not be noticed, to vanish, to be a non-person. And it chimes with the whole sort of elimination of identity that the film follows. It was actually very skillfully. There was some shooting in New York, but much of the New York filming was actually done in Glasgow, which was very similar architecture. Um, but I thought it was a really terrific thriller. There's a pervasive sense of paranoia and distrust and unease, particularly towards the end. I could feel really uneasy about how the story was going, as there are twists and turns and changes in perspective. Um, I thought I've seen a number of Mackenzie's other films. I think this is by far the best. It's the first script from a new screenwriter. This film was on the blacklist of great unproduced scripts. Just for a change, it's actually pretty good, um, and there are some very strong performances. It's a very strong film, very current, and yet it feels of a piece with classic surveillance stories like The Conversation. It's a really terrific film, very thoughtful, brilliantly acted, very tense and engaging. I'd recommend it very highly, and it's, I think, one of my favourites of the year.